All right, Chris Biderman from the Sacramento Bee, kind enough to join us here. We'll shift our attention to the Sacramento Kings coming up here in just a minute, Chris. But we were talking about the San Francisco 49ers a moment ago. Christian McCaffrey, a finalist for multiple awards coming up this awards season. Kyle Shanahan is just as commonplace, a finalist for Coach of the Year. He's not going to win. He's never going to win. But I have that 2022 performance he did as the greatest job as a head coach I've ever seen when he lost Trey, Jimmy, and then went to Brock Purdy. This year is really, really close to that for me.
Yeah, for sure. I think when it comes to the award, I think he's probably a victim of his own success in the past. Because just in general, if you're a casual observer, you look at the 49ers and say, well, they've been to a couple Super Bowls the last few years. Kyle Shanahan's one of the best coaches in the league. Like, it's not super surprising to see them in the playoffs. But you kind of have to peel the onion back a little bit and be like, wait, they got how many games from Mac Jones? And they were with what was their receiving core looking like? And what did their defense look like throughout the season? And then that's when you kind of see the case for like, wow, this was a really impressive coaching job. And to that end too, Robert Saleh now joining the Titans, there's going to be a lot of, it's a big hire. There's a lot of pressure on the hire for defensive coordinator to replace Robert Saleh. So very curious to see who that's going to be. Gus Bradley sounds like the leader in the clubhouse. I'm not totally, I'm not as certain as everybody else seems to be that that's going to be the hire, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with Raheem Morris. I know he's still in the mix for the Cardinals head coaching job. I'd be curious if he would want to join his pal Kyle Shanahan with the Niners if he doesn't get a head job. So, but yeah, I'm with you. Like, I think this is clearly Kyle Shanahan's best coaching job since coming to the Niners, and particularly given the injuries, because we've seen them have similar injury situations before in 2020 and last season, and obviously they were well below 500 in each of those years. And this year they went 12-5 and defeated the defending Super Bowl champs in a playoff game. So I think Kyle Shanahan deserves a ton of credit for how that went.
I got a question I want to ask you regarding the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan and coaching and all this other stuff. But did you guys? I'm pretty sure Chris saw it. Dame, did you see the throwback to when Kyle Shanahan, they're showing the pictures of when he was first the 49ers coach and compared to today? Oh my goodness. A completely different yes, the poor man is
Obama leaving office.
Oh my goodness. It looks like two completely different people. And it's funny, I see like guys like Kyle Shanahan and other coaches, when they're coaching, even Barack Obama, when they're doing this stuff, they age like crazy. The second they get out of the coaching job or and go back to regular life, they're just vibrant and all this other stuff. I don't know if Kyle's
shirtless on the beach.
I don't know if Kyle's ever going to get that opportunity because he's still pretty young. But yeah, it's drastic seeing him from when he first hired to today.
I've seen a bunch of those posts, and I think they do Shanahan a little bit dirty with those, because a lot of the after pictures are from the owners' meetings, and it's like the coach's breakfast. And that coach's breakfast is at 7 a.m. the morning after their big old party that they have. And the parties are, I've been to one of them, and they're pretty epic. It's open bar, it's media, and all the NFL power brokers in one place. And then they have this breakfast, and it never makes sense to anybody why this breakfast is immediately after the party at 7 a.m. So the after photo of Shanahan in that moment is like 7 a.m., big old bags under his eyes, obviously having a couple of his favorite beverages the night before. It's like, man, you got to find another photo for that. You're doing the guy dirty.
The before pictures don't even look real. These are hilarious. These are absolutely hilarious. Before you continue, I caught something on the stream. Did you roll your eyes when Chris said Gus Bradley?
Maybe a little bit. Look, I don't want to judge the guy too much, but he's not my first choice. He's not my first choice. I'd rather have Raheem Morris or Jim Schwartz.
Yeah, I think Jim Schwartz is another good one. Just sort of, you talk about wide nine and all that stuff. He's kind of one of the forefathers of that. So that would make sense to me too. Gus Bradley I think he's a good coordinator, and he's a respected guy, and Kyle Shanahan talked a lot about what the value he had sort of from like an emotional and character perspective. He, told a lot of stories at team meetings this year, et cetera, et cetera. But the last 5 years of him as a defensive coordinator have been pretty uninspiring with the Colts and with the Raiders. And so I think he's probably a good guy to have in your building as a high level of assistant, but I'm not sure he's the guy that you tap to, coach up your roster that might not be as elite as it once was defensively.
Right.
And, like the 49ers, when they've been contending, they've had a top 5 defense. I'm not sure that Gus Bradley is getting that out of that group.
Right. The other thing I wanted to ask you about that is, do the Niners get a pick for Salah this year, or is it
No.
next draft?
No,
Or-
they won't get one because he was only with the team for a year. He needed to be with the Niners for 2 years before they'll get one. They might.
That's a bad.
They might get one. Josh Williams is interviewing with the Atlanta Falcons for their GM role, and they might get 1 or 2 if Josh gets that job. Which I've heard positive things about that, at least for Josh's perspective. So we'll see. But there's a chance they might get some extra comp picks for that.
That's a bad rule. He was under contract.
Oh, Kenny just trying to sell off black coaches. Wow.
It's a wild rule. It's really wild.
Wow.
I need my 5th round pick.
Well,
That's where we do work.
That's right. Martin Luther Shanahan out there keeping the league's minority coaches alive. Shout out to him. Where do you stand, Chris? Chris Biderman of the Sacramento Bee with us. Where do you stand on electrical substations?
Oh
man. I am very much not a scientist and I'm not a doctor, but I would say NFL agents and NFL players are probably not my main source for scientific knowledge. So I understand, the Washington Post, really the genesis of their story was the fact that NFL agents and players are talking about it. And I fully understand why they're talking about it. We're talking about it. The internet's talking about it. I don't, it sounds like most of the scientific community says, this isn't any different than, I know Kyle talked about it with you guys earlier in the handoff. Like, it's not any different than being around, your house with TVs and microwaves and stuff like that. Where I come down on like, what's the cause for the 49ers injury issues? I think they've played a ton of playoff games. They've played 13 or 14 playoff games since Kyle Shanahan's been head coach. That's almost an extra season. And they're doing this all while the new CBAs of 2017 and 2020 have been really restrictive in terms of the offseason work you can do. So I think guys now are bigger, faster, stronger, but they're also doing just less football stuff in the offseason. I think that's a factor. On top of the NFL expanding the schedule to 17 games, taking away bye weeks for number 2 seeds in the playoffs, adding more wild card games. And also doing crazy things with the schedule, like having games on Black Friday and more Thursday games, and everybody's playing international games. So I think it's like just football. I think it's unlucky. I think it's the lack of football in the offseason program. The fact that Kyle Shanahan's still trying to have a super physical training camp despite all of these things. Like, I think it's kind of just a confluence of all of that. And that to me is probably a better explainer for all the injuries with the 49ers than the substation. But again, I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to say that I know for sure. I just know that most scientists believe that it's not a real thing.
Clearly, this is not a real issue at all. But the jokes were hilarious that Christian McCaffrey and Kyle Juszczyk were at the Warriors game. And Jimmy tore his ACL.
Oh, man.
They said they just rubbed off.
That's terrible.
Those guys were healthy. Those guys were healthy.
They just
being in the presence of 49ers.
Yeah, they're radiating. They're radiating from the electrical substation. And it got Jimmy. Could have gotten Buddy. Instead, it got Jimmy. Damn.
It wasn't going to get
That's cold.
He's not in the game.
No.
You
have to play to get hurt.
I thought this was I only thought about this as we were having the conversation, but I thought it's kind of a interesting, in your response, Damien's response to what I was asking was interesting. Say they do the study. They are going to do the study. scientists come back and they're like, it's not really like that big of an issue. I would say at best, it's a 15% chance that it affects these players. What percentage is too much for you? What percentage are you comfortable with? If they said it was a 5% chance, are you still like, nah, that's not good enough?
In terms of like, what's the threshold to like, you got to move your practice fields?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I would be very surprised if they're going to do that. Like there would have to be, to me, overwhelming evidence that like, yeah, this is what happened. Like they would have to be like, well, we tracked George Kittle and George Kittle was over on this side of the field for this many minutes and doing this many reps. And he was within this distance of the substation and popped his Achilles. Like, and there's a correlation between another guy who got hurt, who, was using the same, I don't know. I think it's a super high threshold. It's like, it's very much like, I don't know, not like innocent and like to be guilty, you got to come up with overwhelming evidence sometimes. Right.
Beyond
I just don't.
doubt.
Beyond reasonable doubt. I don't know that that's going to happen. Like, I don't know that there's going to be anything that makes Jed York be like, all right, well, we're going to build a new $30 million practice facility somewhere else in the Bay Area. Like, I just don't really. I guess there's a scenario. There are soccer fields. There are public soccer fields right next to the Niners practice fields. Yeah. That I know there's been kind of contentious relationship, and it's been a contentious topic between the Niners and the city of Santa Clara. With those soccer fields in particular, because I think the 49ers have wanted those to like build parking lots or whatever. Maybe they move them there.
Games.
They
have soccer games during the Niners
right.
games.
Yeah. So maybe there's some deal to be done that moves the practice fields over to where those soccer fields are, which is another, I don't know, 200 or 300 yards away from the substation. I don't know.
Kids, you move closer to the radiating substation.
You know what's ironic about it too?
Can't be anything worse than what's in your food, so you'll be fine.
The ironic thing about this, Chris, and you can tell me if I'm like wrong about this, is nobody ever gets hurt at practice. Nobody for the 49ers ever really gets like these injuries that happen usually happen in the games. They don't really happen at practice.
But they have a lot of hamstrings, a lot of calves during training camp. Like a bunch of guys have missed time during training camp. But again, like I don't know what the data says regarding training camp injuries for Kyle Shanahan. I do know just anecdotally that Kyle Shanahan tends to have one of the more physical training camps. So I wonder if, like, again, with the offseason stuff, there being fewer, there's no padded practice in the offseason. So with there being just fewer football related activities in the offseason and then going into training camp, which, Kyle Shanahan has a very physical training camp. I wonder if just transitioning from no football from like the regular season to late July when camp starts, I wonder if that factors into it for the 49ers. That to me makes the most sense. But again, I don't know. It's a crazy thing.
Chris Biderman of the Sacramento Bee with us here on D1KC on Sacramento Sports Leader. Chris, we'll shift our attention to the Sacramento Kings. How much do you love Dylan Cardwell? Because we're looking for something exciting to talk about, and Dylan Cardwell is as good as it gets. How much do you love that kid?
Man, I was listening to the Insiders and you guys today, and I texted Kyle this, and I said, man, it's kind of emblematic of where the Kings are as a franchise when Dylan Cardwell becomes this much of a positive development. Like, I think it's great for the Kings. Like, I think Dylan Cardwell playing with personality, playing with buy-in, and like actually, protecting the rim in a way that like the Kings haven't had a traditional rim protector in years and years. And they've that to me has been sort of the biggest, I don't know if indictment is the word, but the biggest thing lacking in Domantas Sabonis' game. It's just like, it's hard to play defense at any sort of, it's hard to have a playoff level competitive defense when you just don't have rim protection, and the Kings haven't had it. Even the Beam team, right? They just lack that type of rim protection, and now we have it, and it's like, whoa, where's this come from? A guy's blocking shots at the rim with like weak side defense. Like it's certainly a positive for sure. He fouls too much. Like he's fouling almost 4 times a game and 20 minutes a night. So, he's going to have to cut back on that, but I think he's exactly what they need in terms of, a backup big who maybe develops into a starting big who can protect the rim a little bit and finish. And obviously he's got a big personality, and personality, I think, is something this iteration of the Kings could really use, particularly as they're going through the season they're going through.
I love Dylan. Actually, I love Dylan.
Yes, you do.
He's
Yes, you
everything
do.
that this team has needed. Well, he's a lot of the things that this team has needed over the last couple of years. A guy that is physical at the point of attack when you talk about his defense and around the rim, things like that. A lob threat. They haven't really had that in a while since, the failed attempt at JaVale McGee and all that other stuff. But his energy, and I mean that physically and just his presence, is something that, Chris, I think can carry him to a decade-long NBA experience. Like what he does is transferable to any team in any situation. He could be on a bad team like the Kings and, be able to do that. You could see him on, I'll just throw a team out there. If he was on Boston, they would love him in Boston. He would be a big factor in them being a good team right now. And it's something that if he continues this mentality in the way that he plays, he can be in the league 10, 12 years just off this alone.
Yeah, for sure. Like every team could use a Mitchell Robinson, like that type of guy, right? Like somebody, even if he's not your starting center, if you just have a big that you can match up with Isaiah Hartenstein and match up with Mitchell Robinson and, the guys the Rockets have, Steven Adams, like having a big physical guy is never a bad thing. So that I think ultimately is going to help the Kings long term. I guess where my question would be, like, is he going to develop into a starting center? Is he going to be somebody that you sort of not build the team around, but is he going to be sort of a building block going forward that you could, okay, we have our rim protector, now we can at least play this level of defense, or I think it's interesting that the skill sets between him and Max Reynaud definitely complement each other. Like Max is more skilled finisher, float game, etc. And Cardwell is just the big sort of unrefined rim protector, rim runner type guy. And I think they complement each other well from that standpoint. So yeah, long term, I'm with you. Like there's always a place for rim protection and size in the NBA. And a lot of the good teams in the league have that. They have, whether it's their starting center or backup center, at least they can go to that guy in certain matchups. And if the Kings have, bad perimeter defense, which they've had for years and years, they could at least put Cardwell in there and say, all right, you're not going to get to the rim as easy as you have. You're going to have to do a little bit more after you break down the perimeter defense. And ultimately that's a good thing for the Kings.
Sometimes you just need a player for vibes.
There's that.
And Dylan does some things well, and this team needs good vibes, and Dylan Cardwell supplies them.
Yeah.
I think him and Russell Westbrook, and now that Malik is back in the lineup, what do you make of the Malik Monk thing? Like he was kind of out of the lineup. It felt like something was going on there. Dennis Schroeder gets suspended for 3 games. He comes back, and we've seen what feels like a different Malik Monk since that suspension for Dennis.
And that's one thing, like, I understand Doug Christie's not in a great spot because this isn't a great roster and, the situation is what it is. But there hasn't been any real stability in terms of like what the rotation is, like when guys are coming in, who's finishing games, who's like, is Keon playing? Is Malik playing? Is Dennis playing? Like Dennis is always going to play, but it just seems like is Neat going to play? There's just always sort of this like moving target in terms of what the rotations are. And, the guys talk about it now and again, like there's so many different lineups. There have been so many different starting lineups. And yeah, some of that's for sure due to injury, but it feels like Russ and DeMar are really the only guys that have solidified roles that know kind of where their minutes are coming. And, the Kings are obviously, this is not the long-term roster. Like Doug's still trying to figure it out. But I think one of the reasons why they haven't played all that well is because there isn't really any consistency in terms of what these guys' roles are. And I think the Malik thing plays to that a little bit. The fact that, Malik can go from being out of the rotation altogether to one of the team's most important players in a matter of like a week. Right. Like to me, like I don't, I think at some point, and maybe it'll happen here in the second half of the season and after the All-Star break, where guys' roles start to get solidified. But it just kind of feels like nobody really has a solidified role. And I don't know if that's, I'm sure that there's an element of that being a chicken or egg thing. Like, is it Doug's fault? Is it the player's fault? It's probably a combination of both. But for now, just the Kings' rotation just seems kind of jumbled and it's night to night. And I think that lack of consistency ultimately is affecting the product on the court.
I want to go to Domantas Sabonis. Him not starting.
It's more than Doug has said lately. No, never mind. Go ahead.
Him not starting. Him being on a de facto minutes restriction. I understand what Doug said. It's a minutes restriction. That's what I'm going to go label it as.
Mm-hmm.
But the comment that we talked about earlier when he was asked about, when is he going to start playing more minutes again, and he says, well, there's two guys ahead of him right now, talking about Dylan and Max. What do you make of the energy around Domantas Sabonis and the Kings right now? Is it just, hey, he's coming back from an injury and it's business as normal, this is how you treat somebody coming back from an injury, or is there something more going on in your opinion?
I think there's something more going on. I'm sure you guys have heard the rumors that it's, their people thought that there might have been a Domantas Sabonis deal done within the last couple of weeks. I haven't verified that, but I have heard that rumor. It's weird, man, because and that's sort of one of the other things that's clunky about this Knicks season or this King season is that they're clearly trying to trade guys, but there also isn't really any showcasing going on. Like, that it's happening with Domas. Not that Domas has fit really with this roster at all. Like the numbers, even before he got hurt with Domas were pretty bad just in terms of, net rating and all of those things. And even just the eye test, just like what the offense was. There isn't like DeMar's not a dribble handoff guy. Zach's not a dribble handoff guy. Like, so you have Domas like taking a lot of oxygen on offense with guys who aren't really good at moving without the ball, and they need the ball in their hands. And then where does that leave Domas? Like that whole thing has been a little bit awkward. So, I mean, I would guess that there's probably some weirdness in the fact that Domas is still on this team and the Kings would love to get off of his contract. And it's probably not just a Domas thing. I think it's probably very clear with Zach and to a certain extent DeMar that like, yeah, if the Kings had their druthers, they'd be able to move these guys, but there just isn't much market for them. And Doug clearly wants to play the young centers. And at the same time, it's like, are you hurting Domas's trade value by not playing him? I don't know. I mean, Domas is probably also a known commodity. I don't think anybody trading for Domas is going to be like, well, the last week he hasn't played all that much. What's going on? It's like, it's probably just sort of a situational thing. But yeah, I think we're probably nearing the end of the Domantas Sabonis road, if I were to guess. And whether that's before the trade deadline or this upcoming offseason. And I don't think Domas would be too terribly upset if he got a fresh start on, elsewhere with a team that has a better shot at contending in the near term.
Okay, real quick. It all feels a little strange. The Domas, the Kings situation.
Mm-hmm.
You were at the game. I was at the game too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Domas is working out.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was like on the mend. I thought he was out for another weekend. He's out here.
We had gotten no progression update on Domas at all.
All of a sudden, he's working out in the big court, not even in the practice
in front
facility,
of people. Yeah,
in the big court. Plays a couple of days later, and I don't know. It does feel a little strange.
Yeah.
It does feel a little strange around Domas right now.
Yeah, and like the injury stuff, it makes sense for him not to play in a back-to-back like that. That's I try not to read too much into that. I heard, people mentioning like, oh, it's showcase game against Toronto because Toronto's reportedly been interested. It's like, I don't know that stuff is real. And then of course Domas doesn't play. So it's, I just think it's emblematic of the Kings season. Like all of this has been uncomfortable for a while because the Kings obviously want to move on from some of these guys, and these guys are still here and still sticking it out.
Chris, great stuff as always. We appreciate you, my friend. Give the missus a big shout out for me. She did a story on the Black Youth Leadership Project recently. I've been a board member of that group for the last 4 years. So
awesome. I'll tell her that.
Yeah, definitely. We appreciate you, Chris. Thank you, my friend.
Appreciate you guys. We'll talk soon.
Go Blue.
Right. That's our man. Okay. All right. You don't have to take that, Chris. You don't have to take that. I'll deal with it. We'll deal with the matters internally. Thanks, Chris.